We have Carol Leffler. She's been a Master Gardener volunteer for 18 years, and she is going to share everything that she knows about growing Seminole pumpkins with us this evening.
Hi, everybody. This is Carol, and I'm just really happy and excited to be here tonight. This is a program that has been in the works for a long time, and most of the pictures you're going to see today are my own pictures, because if you're going to learn about growing something, it's really good to take some pictures. So starting right along, these are the topics we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the history and varieties of the Seminole pumpkin, the propagation and growth requirements, so you know what to do at home, different ideas for landscape placement, and then the meat of the program is the 3 Ps of pumpkins: pollination, pests, and practices. Also, to grow pumpkins, you need to be able to recognize pests and beneficials. And then finally, we're going to leave the garden and go into the kitchen and talk about nutrition and some of the uses for food items. And all along during the program, I will keep saying things like keeping records, because records are the way we keep track of our progress and our problems in gardening. So this is a picture of a Seminole pumpkin. It's probably one I grew fairly early on. I think I started growing them around 2013 or 2014. They're traditionally grown by the Colusa Creek and Miccosukee peoples, the indigenous tribes in Florida. The Aboriginal Floridians sliced and dried the fruit. They also pounded the dried fruit into flour. I have not tried that part yet. The shapes and sizes can vary. If you go online and look at different seeds that are available, you'll see a wide range of shapes and sizes, and that's because this is a cultivar that is open pollinated. And so if there's squash nearby, they're going to cross with them. I don't grow any other squash, so mine grow pretty true to form every year. And because it's an open pollinated cultivar, it has a quality that a lot don't. It is tolerant of heat and humidity and disease and insect resistant. One of the things that we're going to talk about today are incidences of all of those problems, but I want you to keep in mind that this is a cultivar that is pretty trouble-free, and it takes a certain amount of neglect and still produces fruit. So it's also nutritious. It has a high shelf storage quality. I can bring one in October, and it will still be good on the counter, not refrigerated, at least 10 months later. So the question is, and there's a lot out on the internet about this, is it a traditional? What's that mean? Is it a native? You will find all kinds of articles that will say it's native. It is traditional because it's a traditionally used fruit in Florida over decades and decades and hundreds of years, but it is not a native. And the place you go to find that information is University of South Florida's Plant Atlas, which is the herbarium. They have 4 different counties that have wild populations that are documented and vouchered. And so those are the only 4 counties where it is growing, where it's growing wild. I will say, later on, I have an area that started itself through some animal removing a seed from the compost pile and probably moving it to my front yard. And so it's pretty easy for, I would think, a wild population to start. Okay, why grow them? I started growing them because I heard they were easy and they're cute little pumpkins. And when I put the slide together, I didn't know whether to put food or fun first, because they're both equally attractive things about the pumpkin. It produces a lot of food if you do it right, or even if you're lucky. It produces seeds to give away, to replant, to dry, a lot of uses. If everybody grew Seminole pumpkins, there would be an unlimited amount of seeds in Florida. Okay, healthy plants can be attractive ground cover. I think a lot of people don't think about that. And they think about Seminole pumpkins being garden plot plants. They're not very much interested in being a plot plant because they like to roam around. But if we're going to plant seeds for one of these pumpkin plants, we're going to plant February to April or as late as July if you're going to watch for pest management. However, you can plant them in the fall. If you want to plant some now, it's a little late, but you can still benefit because when they're young and small and green, you can use them just like zucchini in stir fry or in salads. So you'll see that both of these infographics say to plant in Central Florida by transplants. So in terms of planting, here on the right, I took some seeds that I have big containers of seeds, and I did a germination seed test, 15 of these seeds, and 100% of them germinated in 2 days. And these are from last fall. You want to take your seeds and direct seed them in a well-drained, sunny area. A sunny area for all gardening means 6 or 8 hours of sun during the day. The vines may grow up to 30 feet. And I can attest that they do. When mine outgrow their bed, I pick up the end and I redirect it. I turn it around and make it go the other direction. And that works pretty well. You also have to go out and make sure you do that if you have somebody mowing your lawn, because they won't care about the end as much as you do. You want to provide regular water if the rain is absent. The plants are not real fussy about the soil because anything that grows as a traditional plant and will grow in a wild area is going to use the soil that's there. And by and large in Florida, that is a sandy soil. I'm a little bit blessed where I live because where I live used to be cattle country, and there's a good deal of organic mix in my soils. Excessive nitrogen can deter your fruit set. A lot of people think that you have to fertilize everything. And because this is a traditional plant that does well in poor Florida soils, it does not need excessive nitrogen or fertilizer. And I'll show you in a minute what it looks like when you do that. And lastly, all through the season when you're growing, become aware of what proper crop rotation and soil solarization is, so you can avoid the soil buildup of nematodes and pathogens. So if these grew in 2 days, I waited 3 more days, took a picture, and this is them at 5 days. The little seed leaves are evident. And I want to tell you that in 2 more days, I think these roots have tripled in the last 2 days since this. So locations to grow Seminole pumpkins. Number 1, starter pots, but not for very long, because these plants that I just showed you that had so many roots are going to outgrow a pot like this very, very fast. Compost pile, vegetable garden, mixed edible and ornamental beds, which is not something you would normally think of, and fences and pathways. So let's look at some of those. Okay, this is transplants. Seminole pumpkins, in my opinion, want to be in the ground. They have a substantial shallow root system, and that vine travels, putting down roots at every leaf node if it can. You will read about trellising them, or that the indigenous people grew them up trees, actually dead trees that were girdled. And then they'd send the young ones up to pick the pumpkins when it was time for harvest. But in my experience, every pumpkin vine that is on the ground and at every leaf node can put down roots is going to be a far healthier plant. So also a little commercial here for recycle, reuse, and repurpose. When any of you that are starting to garden, you go to the garden center and you'll see all of these things that you really think you have to have. And always think about repurposing things that you already have at home. And my little stock of 4-inch pots is pretty substantial, and I don't buy any more pots, which are hard to get right now anyway. So here is grown in the compost pile. And you see there's kind of an incidental bag of cow manure. It's just there waiting for when I need it. But you'll see that this is a demonstration of two things. One, it's the first thing that comes up in the spring, and it's coming up there because remnants of pumpkins that are used have been buried there, and there's some remnant seeds that come up. You'll see that these are lush and green, and they're a pretty good demonstration of what happens when you have a lot of nitrogen. What I do with them is, number one, I appreciate the ground cover. Number two, the ones that are going to move out and travel along the fence lines, I may cut off so they're not based here anymore, so I can use the compost heap. So this is kind of like right plant, right place, because it comes up by itself. It's happy. It gets rain, natural rain there. It's another one of what I call the happy accidents. Takes care of my compost pile, keeps the weeds out of it. In the vegetable garden, some people have orderly vegetable gardens, and some people have less orderly vegetable gardens. This is a year I had a very orderly one. This is green beans up here, and then a second crop of green beans. And here there's a pumpkin there. Here this Seminole pumpkin is kind of wending its way through the flowers and next to the beans. In mixed ornamental beds, this is something that I did that was new last year. And this was from the volunteer plant that went down two different sides of the house. It snaked through the caladiums. It came out here, and it traveled all the way down 20 or 30 feet to the driveway. And it looked pretty good. If you're going to have a front yard plant, you want to make sure it looks good, because people don't want to see bad looking vegetable plants. So here's another one mixed in with the pentas. And here it is. This is in the front of the house. Here it is traveling down the other side of the house, and it's going to travel all the way down the pineapple bed in the back, and then I'm going to pick it up and turn it out, and it's going to come back in the front. So it's really nice looking ground cover. Here, the advantage to a mixed bed is that your pollinators are already there. And pollination is the most important thing for a pumpkin plant. So if the pollinators are already there, your plants have an advantage. Here they're with vincas, over here they're with melanospodiums. And again, this is coming down from the area we were just in. This Seminole pumpkin plant came all the way down to the gate and produced pumpkins all the way down. I probably didn't sit in this bench for a couple months, but they love to wander around the fence lines. Fence lines are safe and out of the way places for them to get space and sunshine. Okay, pollination. Pollination is probably the most important thing to cultivating Seminole pumpkins. The plants produce separate male and female flowers, which open in the morning hours and then close typically by noon. So if you want to see the flowers and count them and figure out how many male flowers you have and female flowers you have, you want to go out in the morning, get out there as soon as you can, check out your pollinators, because they're out there, and the pollen from the male flower must be transmitted to the female flower. There is no pollination by wind. It has to be physically carried from one flower to the other. Honeybees are observed to be the main pollinators. You will see other insects in these flowers. I have seen ants. Ants aren't pollinators though, because they're there to drink the nectar. They're there for the sweetness. Other than the honeybees, there are solitary bees. I don't know how many people are aware of how many solitary bees there are in Florida, but they're a very important pollination force. The presence of any kind of bee is going to affect your choice of pest control methods. So let's look at flower structures. First, we're going to look at the male flower. The male flower is the one at the top. And I put them both sideways so you could see that the external view of the male flower, you can see the flower looks the same shape, but there's these very prominent calyxes at the bottom, and there's no bulb at the bottom. This is the outside of the male flower. This is the outside of the female flower, which has this little bulb down here. It's not a pumpkin. A lot of people will look at it and say, that's my pumpkin. That's not your pumpkin until it's pollinated and fertilized. This is actually the ovary of the flower. It's an immature swelling. So let's look at the inside of the male flower. Here's a couple green metallic bees doing their thing in the morning. There's a single stamen inside the male flower. If you look at it, you will see it's like one post. Just one post, and when we get to the female, you'll see the difference. And that stamen is holding the pollen to pollinate and fertilize the female blooms. The male flowers, unlike the female flowers, produce both pollen and nectar. So the male flowers are going to attract the bees. The bees are going to go in to drink the nectar, and while they're in there, incidentally, they're picking up the pollen. A fun fact, there are 300 species of native bees in Florida, and most of them are solitary bees. If you get to paying attention, like early in March and April, there's a kind of bee that comes out of the ground, and it looks like a little bumblebee, and it's called the blueberry digger bee. And they are pollinators for blueberries, but also other things too. They are not aggressive. They cannot sting you. And we love it when they come out. We love that month. Here's the female flower interior structure. It has a lobed structure inside. This is a collection of stigmas. You can see that this takes up a lot more room inside than the single stamen. So the female flower is only going to produce nectar. And why is it nectar? It's nectar because that is the attractant for the bees to visit there. And in fact, it produces more nectar than the male does. So that's a way that the flower says, hey, come to me. Excuse me. I'm really attractive. Come over here. Come to me. So the pollen has to be transported by the bees and the other flying insects. Bees visit the female flower to drink nectar, deposit the pollen collected onto the female flower stigmas. And this next one is very important. When the female flower closes, the opportunity for pollinization is over. It's not going to open the next day, which is we'll talk about that some more. You can also hand pollinate using a little paintbrush if you want to. So here's the pollination time window. Both the male and female flowers need to be open on the same day within the same general area. So if you have a lot of male flowers in the front yard, but just some female flowers in the backyard, that's not going to work. The bee needs a straight path. And usually what you'll find if you have more than one area is that you have more than one set of bees. So the pollination time for every female bloom is only a few hours. After it's open, it closes, and that's it. And that's something you might not notice, because I had to think about that, quite frankly, about whether or not that was what I was observing. And truth is that there's so many flowers open that sometimes you forget which one was open yesterday. So in addition to the flowers only being open a short amount of time, there's another requirement for pollination, and that is that the pollen granules must germinate and grow in order to fertilize the ovule. If some of the pollen granules don't get fertilized, the result is a lopsided pumpkin. And I'm sure you've all seen an apple that looks lopsided, maybe an orange that looks lopsided, or some other fruit that just isn't perfectly round or oval as you would want to pick at the produce counter. You know, you're not going to pick the one that's lopsided up. So, and that's why. So the other stressors are, and this was really important this summer: high temperatures, too much nitrogen, water stress or lack thereof, disease and planting density. You don't want to plant your plants too close together, because then they're just set up to compete against each other. And the weather may also affect pollinator visits. So if you have your flowers are opening and then you get a week of torrential rain, we've had in the last 2 weeks really torrential 2 times rain, up 3 inches or more here. Your pollinators aren't going to come out in that, so that can really affect your fruit set. Here is what happens if the female bloom doesn't get pollinated. This is what is left of the flower. This is the ovary, which is basically literally dying on the vine. And it's just going to fall off. And people will say, why won't, you know, my pumpkin has flowers, the flowers open, the flowers close, but then the little pumpkin, which isn't a pumpkin, falls off the vine. What's wrong? It didn't get pollinated. And also, while we're here, you'll see this little nub here. This is a leaf node. This is the area where the female flower was. This is a root coming down. Every leaf node is going to send roots down if it has the opportunity. In this particular area, there's more mulch that I'm going to show you later. So here's, this was right out in front of my front door last year in the fall. And you'll see here that here's a pumpkin. Here's a male bloom that's going to open. Here's a pumpkin. Here's a new male bloom that's going to open. Here's a pumpkin, or here's a male bloom that's going to open. Here's a pumpkin attached here. And way over here, I can't see it because of the visuals there, but there is a female pumpkin that has failed. So if talking about, excuse me, rooting occurring at the leaf nodes, every one of these leaf nodes has the potential to root. And that means that if I only had one rooted set over here, then this pumpkin and this pumpkin and this pumpkin, would all have to feed off of it. But if the plant roots at every node, then every single pumpkin along this line has its own source of support and nutrients. There is some discussion about removing competitor pumpkins. Like I'd remove one of these so the other two would be larger. You can try that if you want to. I never have. All my pumpkins are about two pounds, and that is that's just what we need for a meal for 2 of us. So speaking of putting down roots, this is the extension demo gardens over in Bartow. They had Seminole pumpkins that they grew this year. And this picture on the left is just such a good example of these roots coming down from the node. And this is a great place because it's got some open soil available. It's got nice, nutritious leaf litter down there. And this is their harvest that they had a couple weeks ago. They're beautiful. So pests. This is the part that is hard sometimes for people to want to like because pests are pests. They're pests to us, and they're pests to the plant, and they're pests to the fruit. So this is a list of the different pests and pathogens that can affect a Seminole pumpkin. In fact, it's a list that what affects pumpkins in general. And I coded this to show you that the 3 that are going to affect a Seminole pumpkin that I see all the time is the root knot nematodes, the caterpillars, and to a little bit of a lesser extent, mealy bugs. These other, the flea hoppers for foliage, the leaf-footed bugs for foliage, white flies for foliage. I see the effects of them, but it's not important. You know, it's not pulling away from very many things away from production. And the last 2, powdery mildew and gummy stem blight, have never ever seen on a Seminole pumpkin. I'm not going to talk about those again. So healthy roots, because roots are the basis of everything that goes on above ground. And I think for people growing new plants, the hardest part, no matter what you're growing, whether it's a vegetable, a fruit, a flower, a house plant, whatever it is that when you plant something, you want to see it growing above soil level right away, because that makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're succeeding. And in essence, what you have to do is have the patience to allow that root structure to develop so that it can feed what's above ground. And so that's one reason why I put the picture in, showing you how many roots were growing on those germinated seeds. They were all roots. They were just all roots. So these healthy roots are very fibrous, especially these. The only way you know what your roots is to pull some up. You know, and once you have a very long vine, you can sacrifice one just to see what's going on if you want to. But these can carry water, they can carry nutrients. You know, there's a lot of surface area that's available to feed this plant. So let's say you pulled that up and you saw it and you'd say, hey, I'm good. You know, I'm doing okay. But you have to look a little closer sometimes. And this is a close-up of one of those. And it shows those healthy roots able to transmit water and nutrients. And it also shows evidence of early nematode infestation. And that's all these little bulbs. All these little bumps that you see are unsegmented, microscopic roundworms that can also bring pathogens to the plant. They can stunt the root from being able to send nutrients. They stunt the root from being able to send water. And your plant will start to look like it's unhappy above ground, because what it's telling you is, I'm hungry, I need water, and I don't feel good. You know, you will be able to tell by looking at the plant, and then you need to investigate every time. So as I said, the only way to diagnose that is to pull one up. So this is what happens between this and this. Let's say this was in August. I have a later one that was in November. You sense that the leaves aren't looking good. They might be droopy. Insects are coming to attack the leaves, because insects hone in on plants that are unhealthy. So these are galls that are filled with root knot nematodes. Interestingly enough, I didn't know this before, they're females. Females are the nematodes that are inside the roots. The males are cruising around outside. They come and visit. So this is one of the most destructive plant parasites. It just sucks all of the vigor out of a plant. Oops. So this is another view. The one on the left is probably the first time I ever found them. When you're looking at these, they look like they're roots that go straight down into the ground. They're not. Seminole pumpkin roots kind of lay under the soil, much like the traveling stem over them does. So if you pull them up, it's going to be like pulling stitches out. It's good. So this may have been laying out all that direction. So if the plant looks really bad, the drastic response is to pull the whole thing out, because all of these nematodes are also breeding in the soil. And that bodes ill for the next time you want to plant something there. So here's an option. If there's two new, healthy, rooted, distant lengths of vine, pull the roots up, all the bad ones, until you get to there, and then stop. And let that vine go on from there. It's kind of like renewing the vine. Nematodes remain in the soil and overwinter easily. In fact, if we're going to talk about we're going to mention soil solarization. And that's one thing you would do for soil that is infested with nematodes. However, one of the things that happens with soil solarization is one of the responses is that the nematodes travel deeper into the soil, and later on they're going to migrate back up. So solarization is only effective up until the first few inches that it affects. And also, well, I don't want to forget to say this. You saw the compost pile. Never ever put a damaged or diseased plant in your compost pile. Never ever. Bag them and make sure you dispose of them off site, because it will come back to haunt you. So caterpillar infestations are the second most pesky thing to deal with. They're the major insect problem for Seminole pumpkins. You can see a number of little ones. These are probably first and second instars. This particular caterpillar has 5 different instars, and that means he molts 4 different times so that he can grow bigger. So what you need to do is, as soon as you see some holes in leaves, you know they're munching on them. You have to find out which kind of caterpillar he is and what you should do about it. And once again, if you have fertilized, which you don't need to do, you're going to have heavy nitrogen, leafy greens, and they're going to come in numbers, because that's young and tender, and it tastes so good to them. Every bug in town will know you fertilized. So here's the melon worm. This is what is involved out in my gardens with my Seminole pumpkins. It is, I'm not going to read you all the figures, but the moth up there, the female moth, I have never seen her, and you will never see her, because she, most likely you won't, because she's very small. She comes in, she lays her eggs, and off she goes. But this 5th instar, that's not life size, by the way. This 5th instar, he eats in his lifetime of 5 instars a lot of leaves, and then he pupates. So you can get through one generation in 28 to 30 days. So think about the good weather we have and how many generations are possible. So let's say you're scouting, every morning I'll maybe take a cup of coffee out and say, I'm going to go take a walk in the gardens. let's say you're scouting and you're kind of busy that day, and you see this all of a sudden, because all these leaves over here, they're pretty happy, and you see this and you go, oh, I wonder what that is. And then you get busy and you go back in the house. And then the next day you come out and you find this and you go, uh-oh, I've got to do something. What do I do? And so then you either call the plant clinic or, put into practice what you know you need to do. But if you leave it for another day, you may come out and find this, which is a skeletonized leaf. And you can see why it's a skeletonized leaf, because only the skeleton is left there. They've eaten everything tender and juicy. This melonworm may even, I don't think he did this one, but he may even have pupated here. He's going to save a place somewhere to pupate. And most likely it's not going to be here because that leaf is done. It's not a very good home anymore. So if you go out, you've kind of ignored this until it got to this point, the only response is to take that leaf and bag it and tag it and get rid of it. But another scouting clue is this. This is frass. It's caterpillar droppings. These are not, they're probably little pieces of mulch, but all of the rest, this is caterpillar droppings. And you may lift up a higher leaf and see the frass on the lower leaf, because that's one of the best ways to look for it, is to look on a lower leaf, because they're depositing on the leaf below. It's a time to really be looking to find the caterpillars. So examine the lower leaves for droppings from above. Okay, so let's say you lifted a leaf and you found this guy. And I love this picture because this is probably a 5th instar, because he's really big. This is a really cool picture, because as he is ingesting a leaf, where's my cursor? This is the leaf moving through him, all the way through him, and there's a little piece of frass. So a lot of people say, ew, a bug. A lot of people are not too interested in looking at bugs because they don't know a lot about them, I guess. I don't know. I used to be one of those. I remember a 9th grade biology book, I would put a piece of paper over a picture of a bug in the top corner of the page because I didn't want to see it. But the more you know about why they do what they do, the more interesting and fascinating they become. This is a single melonworm egg. So if you went out and scouted, here's a leaf and it has 3 nice size instars on it. You can see they've even put a little webbing over themselves. Whether that's to begin pupating or just for something to do that day, I don't know. I see a lot of younger ones that go ahead and maybe they're practice webbing. I don't know, but melonworms, other than the really big ones, still exhibit this behavior. And you may think, okay, well, there's 3 of them. I'll pick those off and I'll be done. But if you look a little closer, there's the next generation. So the moth not only has been here a while back, or a different moth, and laid these that are now in the probably 4th or 5th instar, but she has come back, or her sister did, and laid all of these new eggs, which are going to hatch and really munch down on this particular. I mean, that's a lot of eggs on one leaf. So I took one of these leaves. They exhibit a leaf folding behavior when they pupate, and this is what it looked like. See, he's even got an anchor silk going on there. And so I opened it up so we could get his picture. Here are the 2 stripes of the melonworm on the pupa that's developing. And he's just going to stay in that little tent until it's ready to become a moth. And there's the pupa. This is about 6/10 of an inch, real size. This is another one. All of these things were going on the plants, most of them on the same day for all of these slides. So you go, okay, well, we looked at some melonworm eggs. Oh, there's a melonworm. There's some eggs. That must be melonworm eggs. Wrong. It's like all of a sudden you think you're paying attention and you know what you're saying, and then you see something that just, you know, it's not right, but you have no idea what it is. So these are leaf-footed bug eggs. Some of them are beneficial, some of them aren't. You have to find out. But even though these eggs have been left on the Seminole pumpkin leaves, this insect has never been a problem. And maybe it was eaten by an insect. Maybe it was parasitized by an insect. I can tell you for real that these were removed and bagged and tagged. So if you see them, again, bag and tag, because you don't want them to grow up. I also read somewhere, this has been quite a while ago, that if you smash the eggs of caterpillar, that the mother moth can smell the pheromone and know that her eggs are destroyed, and she will come back and lay some more. So I never smash them. I bag and tag them. So she'll have to just come and look if she wants to see if they're there. So the next major problem, and the last major problem really, is mealy bugs. And this is a problem that's always a surprise. You're not expecting to see it. They're small, soft-bodied little insects, not very long. The body looks white and cottony, and it has a wax secretion. So if this was underground, having water come down through the soil or having soil around them doesn't bother them, because they have this like protective armor for a small, soft insect. In Seminole pumpkin plants, they appear on the roots, often below ground, and occasionally above ground. This is an insect that it has piercing, sucking mouth parts, and it's attached to this root. It can move around though. It's attached to this root, and it is sucking juices out, even as the nematodes on the inside are sucking juices out. And so you can see that these roots are just so compromised by so many disadvantages. If you harvest your pumpkins, you will notice repeated occurrences. If I have one on the table and you pick it up and look at the blossom end, there'll be little baby mealy bugs there, at which point I just wipe them off. But you have to keep watching, because the eggs are so microscopic that you'll miss them. They'll come back. Ladybugs are very effective on large populations of mealybugs. They're not so effective on small populations, because they're economists. They only want to come and spend time where there's a good meal, where there's a big meal. So this is a picture of a close-up of these mealybugs. And it has no words on it because it needs no words, but they look like little tiny dust mops. And you can see, again, there's the different size end stars. Here's probably a 5th star end star. Here's a very small one. There are many, many different kinds of mealybugs, and it's hard to figure out which one you have, but they all affect the plant in the same way. And here's another one just for scale. The next one I want to talk about minorly is whiteflies. They're a potential for minor damage because they also inject a mouth part into the leaf. They can spread viruses that they carry, and you will see a round spot where the leaf is turned yellow. They're much more dangerous for tomato plants. You see them all the time on tomato plants. They're very hard to, it's another insect that you can't ignore. So if you have tomato plants and you're growing Seminole pumpkin plants, number one, they should not be planted near each other at all. And number two, as soon as your tomato plant is harvested, you should bag and tag it. You know, that's another plant that you never, ever put in the compost heap. The whitefly prefers plants with excess nitrogen, another one of those. Border plants can attract beneficial insects. Marigold, crackerjack variety is one such planting that can attract beneficial insects. I have not observed these on my Seminole pumpkins. However, they're really tiny. I recognize one when I see it. They're very tiny, but the minor leaf damage is consistent with what they may do. Here's another very minor one. He's a garden flea hopper. He's kind of a cute little guy. He is a common garden pest. He occurs all year, but you probably never even see him because he's so small. And again, you see these areas of damage on the leaf. And you know, they're not holes. It depends on how many different kinds of damage are on the leaf before you look at a leaf and say this leaf can't function to provide the plant vigor anymore. Parasitic wasps are their enemies. Here's a beneficial insect, a green lynx spider. I think probably everybody has seen one of these in their landscape. You can see them on bushes, on trees, on small plants. They web. They make when they put their egg cases in a conspicuous place, because we watch them when they leave an egg case, and you watch it every day for when the little ones are going to come out. They're beautiful, number one, and they are voracious eaters of insects, some good and some bad, because this is a leaf-footed bug. There are both beneficial leaf-footed bugs, say that 3 times fast, and there are some that are in the pest variety. Okay, this is a slide that I've spent a lot of time on in the last week because I had to determine what it is we're seeing. These are, and I got confirmation on it, these are braconid wasp cocoons. And braconid wasps are wasps that are parasitoids of caterpillars. They come and they lay their eggs inside the caterpillar. And then I'm going to talk about what happens next. This picture is one that is in a hornworm. But this picture, and you'll see all of these little cocoons, it's like he's carrying them on his back. We'll talk about how that happened. And this one, a different caterpillar, but one that is vouchered in Polk County, has, excuse me, this one has cocoons that have emerged from both sides of the caterpillar after they've been feeding inside it. Again, another one of those things that's just really fascinating to watch. So this and this, they are solitary braconid wasps. So when you think about a wasp, the first thing I think visually that your mind thinks about is a garden variety wasp that you get stung by. And he's a pretty big wasp, that this is not a very big wasp. This is about 3 millimeters, and we'll see how small he is later. Here's what happens. The eggs are laid into the caterpillar body by the female wasp. She injects the eggs into the body. The eggs hatch into larvae that feed on the caterpillar insides. They also have a chemical which prevents the caterpillar's body from, you know how our bodies will envelope a foreign body so that it can't be transmitted to the rest of the body, like white cells. Well, these eggs have a chemical that keeps the caterpillar from being able to isolate and not let them bother. You know, he is liquidized from the inside out. And so then they burrow out over here. First picture ever found that actually shows them burrowing out. And then once they're outside, then each one spins a cocoon. And then they will pupate there, and then they will come out of the cocoon. And this caterpillar is dead because he has nothing to keep him alive anymore. So we talked about how big this wasp must be. This is a picture of brocconid wasp in our collection. He's 3 millimeters long. This is how big he is on a penny. And so this is another insect, and it's such a good insect. He's fighting for you every day. That you don't want to, use pesticides and do away with. So that's one beneficial insect. The other one is one that we all know, and that's the ladybug. Or as they say, an entomologist would say to you, lady beetle, because they're not a bug, they're a beetle. They typically feed on all your plant pests, aphids, mealy bugs, mites, scales, whiteflies, and even mildews. If they don't have any of those insects, they will supplement their nutrition with nectar, water, honeydew. So this is one of the most important and known biological control insects. However, not very many people know what the nymph looks like. And this is a picture of the nymph. This is a picture of the eggs. They're kind of like little barrels that are pointed on both ends. So you want to make sure, if you're using chemicals, to not use chemicals that's going to affect these good bugs. Honestly, I haven't had to use anything on Seminole pumpkins. They are pretty good at holding their own. So you want to become familiar with the different ways that ladybugs will present. These are 2 different pictures, probably of the same larva. These are 2 different species of ladybugs. These are the newly hatched nymphs, although they have several forms too, different species. These are the eggs on a stem. Most people never see this, but if they do, most people think, oh, that can't be good, but that is exactly what you want to see more of in your garden. So your practices to deter caterpillar pests. 1, always routine scouting, hand picking of caterpillars and other pests, prune and dispose of highly infested and damaged foliage. And then I always recommend natural enemies and biological controls, because if you depend on nature, the more that you bring in diverse plants, the beneficials will come in and use those diverse plants to repopulate. And all of these are plants that attract beneficials. They are not the only plants that attract beneficials. If you're going to use a really good response, if you have just a lot of caterpillars, and maybe they're so small that you don't see them and it's becoming an issue, you can use Bacillus thuringiensis. This is called BT, and it's a naturally occurring bacterium found in soil, fresh water, and so on. You have to follow the directions. More is not better. You know, the label is the law, and it's the most commonly used microbial insecticide. Other selected natural products are horticultural oils, neem oil, and insecticidal soaps. So, general maintenance practices. So here's two pictures, and on the right is a vine that, you know, there's some aging out going on there, and some of it's because of some insect damage, some of it's because of some piercing, sucking little guys, and you would want to remove a plant that can no longer nourish the vine. And that's exactly what I did, what I started to do over on the left-hand side, because again, this was a side yard viewable from the road. And I took off a lot of leaves to see how far I needed to go. Always stop right before you think you should, you know, because you can't put it back. So there's still some leaves there that need to be removed. But what I'm assessing at this point is how many of those, I'm going to go see what the root structures are down the line, and I'm probably going to prune out all of those bare vines there. So anyway, again, you're going to remove and dispose the damaged leaves, the visible pests, exposed aging vine stems. Look at the roots, always look at the roots, pull up at least one, it's not going to hurt it. Redirect the vines when necessary. And lastly, those two cultural practices of crop rotation and soil solarization. Crop rotation is really important. And I'll stop and tell, what time is it, 7 o'clock? A quick little story about the farmer's wife and the farmer. The farmer knows that he has to rotate his crops. The farmer's wife, and I'm doing stereotypical roles here, is in the house doing the canning. She doesn't want to can the same 6 things every year. That's too much work. And so if the crop is rotated, she only sees green beans every 3rd year. She only sees corn or whatever every 3rd year, because that's the only way she can keep up. And I get involved in some of that. So harvesting real quickly. Seminole pumpkins can be harvested when they're very young. Here's one that can be used as zucchini or stir fry. And this, if you were to plant now, you would definitely get these before the first frost. 12-3, that's why I picked that one. When very young, use them that way. At full size but green, that's what these are. At full size and colored up. The second method, full size but green, is what I usually do. And the reason is because of this. Because this is probably raccoon damage. They will come in. A lot of times, this one, I believe, yeah, it's in July. It's really hot outside. Maybe they just need a drink of water. And so that's Florida friendly principles, you know, provide water. Again, if a raccoon comes and he started to munch on this, I'm going to leave that one there in the garden so he can finish it rather than pick a new one. So you have to work with your critters. So moving from garden to table, we're out of the garden. This is about 1/5 of what I harvested last year. And you can see they're all in various stages of being ready. A nod to nutrition. Pumpkin is such a good food staple because it's low calorie, low fat, low sugar, low sodium, high vitamin A, high fiber, everything the doctor orders. I mean, it's really a great food. shelf life, we already talked about a little bit. Here is a pumpkin that, as of last week, has been sitting on my shelf for 10 or 11 or 12 months. And it's on its way out the door, but I wanted you to see what it looks like. In fact, the outer shell starts to powder off. And once the handle cracks off, then you know you have rot. But I save this for the picture. Again, we talked about watching for the Mealy bugs that happen on the blossom end. So if I have 4 of these sitting on the counter about once every week or 2, I pick them up, I take a look at it, and I wipe them off. Other storage, pressure can those cubes, never puree. USDA says never puree for a reason. Freezes as cooked and pureed and dehydrate. So here's roasted Seminole pumpkin. We have this a lot for a dinner. It's kind of like a personal pan pizza, but it's a personal pan pumpkin. These are about 2 pounds. When you take all the centers out, they're about less than that. You put them in the microwave for about 7 minutes until they're fork tender, bring them out. This is better than roasting any of them because you're saving electricity and you're reducing the heat in your home. Savory choices. One Christmas, we served the soup course in our Seminole pumpkins. Pumpkin day in the kitchen for freezer product. I baked them whole because it was a whole lot faster than scooping them all out. I can scoop them out later. I had a lot of pumpkins and I could let some of that go. Although it's possible to reclaim that product inside too. Although you wouldn't want to, you'd use those seeds for roasting rather than for planting. So you just, I don't think I have to read all that to you, but in essence, what I did was I pureed it down, put them in freezer bags. 8.5 ounces is enough for an order of muffins, and 2 of the bags is enough for pumpkin pie. Really, really delicious. Pumpkin muffins. Here's the seeds. If you soak them in water before you oven roast them, it makes them crisper. We're going to talk about removing the attached pulp. It's kind of a messy job. I put them in a sieve and I run water over it and I separate them out. And this is just the absolute best thing you can do with a Seminole pumpkin. They turn out just beautifully and they're so good. So here's canning day. Canning day is a lot of work. Usually I spread it over 2 days. I cut them up for 1 or 2 days, stick them in the fridge, come out and do the rest the next day. The reason why, I'm not going to say an awful lot about this, but the reason why you never pressure can pumpkin puree as they do in the industry is that pressure canning in the home, you cannot guarantee with puree that the heat will penetrate all the way through a puree. And that's why you only pressure can in cubes. But I did can some juice, and that was kind of fun. So at the end, this is what you have left. This is all that pulp, and you cook it up, and you see there's those little seeds that are left. Those are the ones you're going to wind up, some of them in the compost heap. And this pulp can be used in baked goods. I don't can it again. I either use it as a freezer product, an instant product, or whatever. Most people throw this part away, and it's a lot of food to throw away. And so finishing up the season, this is what goes in. There's a little seed there. This is what goes to the compost pile. You want to bury it because the critters will come and they will dig it up, and then you'll have to rebury it the next day. I really don't care about the raccoons as much as I do when rats come. Rats are bad. So we usually not only bury, but then we somehow cover so that it cannot be dug up for a while. And The last big thing I want to talk about is keeping records. These are all the kinds of records you can do. You know, you may keep some of these records the first year and decide the next year you should have done some of the rest. And you know, that's kind of what I've come up with as a total list. And you want to also keep records of your production. And if you only make one or two, then you know you make a note in your journal that I harvested 2 or 6 last year from that surprise bed. I had 120 pounds of pumpkin. It was incredible. Between that and a little bit in the backyard, it was just really incredible. So this was what I have, and how I mentioned the rotation of growing something. I'm not growing pumpkins this year because I don't need any more pumpkins this year, but my seeds will still be viable. So summing up, we did all of this today. Got through all of these, the 3 P's of pumpkins: pollination, pests, and practices. Yes, you can carve a Seminole pumpkin. You can even carve it and not take the lid off and be able to get everything out of the inside of it. It was so much fun. And this is my canning closet, and I will entertain some questions.